Hi, dear Sister Chan Kong. Thank you, Terry, for the beautiful meditation to ground us. And thank you, everyone, for arriving this morning to remember. This morning, before I start, I'd like to just acknowledge the earth beneath us, knowing that all our ancestors, all of blood, land, and spirit, names who we know and those who've been lost, and many who walked this earth millions of years ago, and those who lived just yesterday, and those who are yet to come. Remember the earth, our first ancestor, the great mother that nourishes every tree, every river, every breath. Without the earth, there would be no us. Over 3 million years ago, a small being walked upright, one of many, called Lucy, known as Dinikesh, meaning you are marvelous. She is our grandmother of grandmothers. We acknowledge her as our ancestor and remember. I bow to my own land ancestors. Their joys and wounds live in me. Their resilience and pain breathe in every cell. And I know that they're your ancestors too. We are a shared human family. I also bow to all our ancestors of blood and of spiritual lineage. Your ancestors and my ancestors. We know that many may have created harm and many have been harmed as well. But they are all our ancestors. And to those who have come before us, we know that their joys and sorrows breathe through us. And when we remember, this is already the work of our healing. It's only in this moment, or it's only in the present, that the past and the future meet. And it's the only place where transformation is possible for us human beings. As Terry mentioned, this time of the year in autumn, across Gregorian and lunar calendars both, as the nights across all these calendars, the nights grow long, many traditions turn towards remembrance. Each carries their own story, yet they all recognize this truth, that the veil between life and death at this time grows thin, and we are called to remember, not just this month, but remember so that we can remember throughout the year, throughout our life, and in this remembering, also commit to repair. In Celtic lands, Terry mentioned Samhain, now through Christianity, known as Halloween's, All Saints' Day, and so forth. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos, and in India, Pitru Paksha, the living turn to honor those who have passed and to give thanks. Not just give thanks, but also heal. And it's part of that healing move to transformation. This act is so simple. This memory is so simple. But there is a conviction behind all these traditions. If we care for our ancestors, if we care for all our ancestors, they continue to care for us because they come with us in the present. Here in the UK, Black History Month in October, and internationally Indigenous Peoples' Day invite us to remember those whose labor and lives were taken to build the wealth around us, to tell the truth of our history. Their memory is a call to repair, And we have Remembrance Day to commemorate the sacrifice of soldiers and civilians in wartime, to reflect on the cost of war and the importance of peace. Their memory is a call to repair, to reckon, to remember. And in the Buddhist tradition, the Tibetans, La Bab Duchen, recall the day when the Buddha descended to remember and offer gratitude to his mother, enabling her to achieve liberation. So I see across the world, across traditions, this season is the same teaching. Death is not an ending, but a continuation of peoples and energies. Those who came before us, they live in us, around us, and continue through us. If you recall, many of us will know the night of his awakening, the Buddha, after the battle with Mara, simply reached down and touched the earth, saying, "The earth is my witness." The earth trembled. Awakening then was not about transcending the world, but belonging fully to it. To touch the earth is to remember that truth, that we stand upon the witness of all who came before, and that our awakening, our liberation, our peace is bound to theirs. In our tradition, we practice touching the earth, a deep bow for those who can, that brings the forehead to the ground, or we touch the earth in so many other ways. And when we touch the earth, we acknowledge our ancestors with the intention to release the illusion of separateness, so that this veil between those who've come before us and those of us who are here becomes porous. There is no separation. Across all cultures, spiritualities, in Hindu, Pitrupaksha, Pranam or Dadavat, the bowing, the prostrations. In Mexico's Dia de los Muertos, in Catholic and Christian genuflection, in the African Egungun rites, Islamic sujud, Jewish kriya, and the indigenous ceremonies, we find the same gesture to lower ourselves, touch the earth humbly, and remember. In that act, no matter who we call on, we say, "I belong to this earth. I remember. I am not separate." Touching the earth is not submission. It's the start of our awakening through our humility. It bows to the soil that holds our ancestors' bones, to the rain of blood that once flowed through their veins. And so we rise. When we rise transformed, joining with all who bow in remembrance and return. And in that touching of the earth, we release our pride, despair, and find strength in the belonging, the shared recognition that we are not separate from the earth, from one another, or from those who came before, or even those who are yet to come. May I have the bell, Terry? When I reflect, and touching the earth is my favorite practice. I do it as often as I can in so many ways, whether it's a remembering, doing the formal ceremony of bowing, touching in the morning and the evening, or just walking or touching my desk. I try to recall that it's not only about honoring what was, but transforming what was in the here and now. It's a reminder that when we bow, whether in sujud, in dandavat, or in genuflection, we receive everything: the gifts, the wounds, the wisdom, the delusion, the love, and the harm. We do not pick and choose. We bow to the whole of our inheritance. I'm going to share something a little about my personal, because I feel that our teachers taught us that this is where transformation and healing must take root, in the personal. When I look deeply at myself, I see I carry forward streams of generations of experience. Some nourishing, some painful. Many of these patterns were handed down long before I could name them. My mother's anxiety became my hypervigilance, always scanning, always bracing for what might go wrong. Maybe that's something you experience too. My grandfather's unprocessed grief became my melancholy, a quiet sadness that arrives sometimes without reason. And we know now that through the study of epigenetics, that stress, survival, and those patterns are passed down through generations, not only through stories and behaviors, but encoded in the body itself, in our blood, in our genes, long before we are even born. I notice this in myself. Sometimes I feel afraid when there's no danger. Sometimes I feel rage larger than anything that's happened in the moment I'm in. And this mindful breathing helps me sense this fear is very old. This anger, this afraid has been building up across generations, waiting to be heard, waiting to be healed. But I notice I also inherited something else, a deep commitment to justice, to standing with those who suffer, to not looking away. My parents, grandparents, great-grandparents fought for justice through nonviolent resistance. They organized, they protested, they put their bodies on the line. That courage lives in me. Their conviction that a better world is possible, that too is my inheritance. That too is your inheritance. And here I often am reminded, this is where the work of our practice of balance becomes necessary. I notice this habit energy that I pour my energy into social justice work. It felt and it feels like I'm honoring my ancestors, continuing their legacy. And it probably is. But I was also continuing another pattern, one I didn't see clearly at first. My ancestors sacrificed many things for their struggle. Their health, their rest, sometimes their families. Perhaps there's some nobility in this. But there is also an unexamined belief for me that my worth depends on usefulness, that self-care is selfish, that to rest while others suffer is betrayal. And I notice how my body keeps score. Illness, fatigue, a nervous system that sometimes doesn't settle. And it's through practice, touching the earth, breathing, I've realized that I'm not only honoring my ancestors' courage, I was also perpetuating their suffering. It was the story of Kitsigarba, Bodhisattva, that helped me and reminded me to see some of the darkness and to bring light into the darkness, but also to see in the light that sometimes there is darkness too. For those of us who remember, and I'll remind us, in the Mahayana tradition, in our tradition, it is said that Kitsigarba looked upon the suffering of beings in the deepest hell realms, and he descended into it, or he descends into it, carrying only a small lamp, walking through the darkness, not to conquer, but to bring light. That lamp for me is the awareness, the ability, the discernment to look directly at what has been handed down, to bring light where there's been avoidance or silence, in the wholesome and perhaps the unwholesome too, but it's easier to focus on the unwholesome because sometimes looking at what I perceive as my wholesome behavior requires me looking deeper to its volition, its intention, its inheritance. And it's a reminder that this acknowledgement, this remembering, this striving, this bringing of the lamp is not to fight it, not to suppress it, but to illuminate it. Healing does not come from effort only, of fighting, suppressing, but from the start of seeing clearly. Each moment of recognition is a lamp that we carry into the dark. And it's now, as a memory of the story, I try to ask myself, what if the lamp of that light is rest? What if the descent is simply to sit with my own exhaustion and breathe compassion into it? Sometimes maybe that lamp is just one mindful breath, the courage to stay present with weariness or grief. And when I remember, I say, this is my inheritance. I'm ready to hold it with compassion. The Buddha taught us the middle way, balance, not self-sacrifice, not self-centeredness, but wise care as part of our caring for all beings. Thai reminds us that to hold our suffering, we must cultivate our capacity to hold it. And in our practice, we have the Brahma Viharas, the practice of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and gratitude. For me, this is like practicing loving kindness and compassion for myself is like a daily vitamin shot, building some inner steadiness that allows me to hold the pain, to go deeper without being overwhelmed, or turning away. And it's through this I'm learning the difference between compassionate action and compulsive action. That saying no allows a truer yes later. That caring for my body, sleeping, resting, even asking for help is not a betrayal, but foundational. And this for me, in touching the earth, in the remembrance, I can see I can honor my ancestors' courage while healing the wounds their sacrifice created. And perhaps by learning to care for myself with compassion, I'm creating a new inheritance, one that tells future generations my worth is not measured by my productivity. I do not have to choose between the world's healing and my own. They are intertwined. May I have another sound of the bell, Terry, please? And as we heal within in our personal transformation through remembrance, we become strengthened and capable of touching the larger wounds we share, our inheritance. So this remembrance of the season also calls for truth-telling. Just as individuals inherited patterns and we inherit patterns, so do our societies. We have all inherited collective ones through extraction, violence, colonialism, slavery, and so many other ways, systems of harm that have been built. These patterns of harm, exploitation, occupations, killing, disparities of wealth and opportunity, the silencing of some voices and not others, continue in so many visible and invisible ways. These patterns don't disappear just because we touch the earth or we sit in a sangha. These are not stories of the past. They live in us, in our institutions, in our communities, even in our sanghas, sustained by the same underlying poisons the Buddha named over 2,500 years ago: greed, delusion, hatred. And because our sanghas are made of human beings, all of us as flawed human beings, we reflect the very pattern we seek to transform. Power, privilege, and exclusion can appear in subtle ways, still continuing those elements of greed, delusion, and hatred. Their remembrance and recognition is not a failure. It's an invitation to practice, to transform. Thai often reminds us that the Sangha is the Buddha's continuation body. And when we as a community have the courage to see our suffering clearly, it becomes capable of healing deeply and supporting transformation beyond the Sangha into society itself. So our practice of remembrance, of touching the earth, invites us to look deeply, not to accept or to generate guilt only, but to cultivate awareness for engaged right action. As our 11th mindfulness training asks us, to practice looking at our livelihoods, our consumptions, and inquiring, am I participating in systems that cause harm? How can I live in ways that nurture healing instead? So in this time of remembrance, we ask to face these painful truths. Because even in Halloween, the walking around, collecting sweets is also an underlying story of generosity, of offering something. And when we look at these underlying stories with honesty and compassion, and we bow to the earth, we say, I see the suffering. We will not turn away. To remember is to vow. May this suffering not continue into another generation. And from that remembrance, there is a ripening of commitment. Like Kitsigarbha, we walk into it carrying this lamp, remembering that awareness alone is not enough. It must move through our hands, our speech, our daily choices. And when we touch the earth and remember, we are also checking, what is mine to do? From that place of stillness, right action becomes clear. Not from urgency, not from guilt, but from compassion. And when we touch the earth together, we take this vow together to heal our lineage, to transform anger and fear, to cultivate the energy, to mend the broken places in our families and our societies. We cannot undo history, but we can change its direction. And for me, when we stand up from touching the earth, that's what it means to rise up differently. And when our sanghas embody these qualities, it becomes a living field of awareness, an ecosystem of care that automatically and naturally gives rise to compassionate action. The self and the collective through the Sangha into our. Because we share the mindfulness and the compassion, transformation arises from us and between us. This is the remembrance, a social repair, awareness becoming action, and action grounded in love. So remembrance in all the autumn festivals across the world means lighting the way forward. Candles and lamps, lights are kindled across the cultures. On Samhain, it's guiding the spirits home through the darkness. On Dia de los Muertos, bridging the worlds with marigolds and candles. On Pitru Paksha, honoring the ancestors through offerings. And on Diwali, celebrating the victory of light over ignorance. On Yom Kippur, hearts turn towards forgiveness. During Sukkot, reminds us also of impermanence. The Jewish Yizkor prayers, blessing life even amid loss. Black History Month, we honor resilience of those Black ancestors. And on International Day of the world's indigenous people, we uplift the wisdom and struggles of the indigenous communities. In African villages, in drum calls of remembering those who've laid their lives in wars, and African villages where drums call ancestors home, and indigenous ceremonies where smoke rises from sacred fires. And now, for us, what lamps are we lighting? What light are we creating for those who come after us, those future generations? The light we create lives in the smallest acts, to pause before reacting in anger, to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others, to act in integrity even when it costs us comfort, and to keep showing up even when transformation feels impossible. That is remembrance, knowing that our smallest actions ripple outward, touching generations past and future. As Thai said, dear friends, let us remember, when we touch the earth, let us remember we are touching the whole river of continuation. We connect with the earth to release the illusion of separateness. We remember to continue our ancestors' wholesome energies and to bring healing to the wounds and harms that remain unfinished. We acknowledge our collective inheritance, systems of greed, violence, and delusion, and we act to transform them so that healing can take root in our society and in ourselves. Together we ask, what is mine to do? Not in guilt, but in responsibility. Not alone, but together. To break the cycles of harm, to speak where silence once ruled, to create new patterns of balance and compassion. For me, this is remembrance. This is what the season of remembrance brings. Thank you, dear friends, for listening.